The visual is not important here. The music is not important here. The voice is not important here. What matters are the words. If you cannot listen to the words, you do not belong here. If you understand this, welcome to the Fate Club. Humanity does not begin on Earth the way history presents it. What is called origin is not a point in time, but a state of consciousness. Before biology, before language, before memory collapsed into linear identity, consciousness existed as a multidimensional structure capable of perceiving itself across densities of time. The human form is not an experiment of creation, is a restoration vessel. Consciousness does not originate in the brain. It is phased through it, like a signal stabilized in matter. DNA is not a biological accident. It is a living interface between dimensions designed to translate non-local consciousness into physical experience. What is called junk DNA is not an error. It is dormant capacity. It remains inactive not because it is damaged, but because the perceptual environment was hostile to its activation. Our cosmic origin is not mythological. It is architectural. Human DNA was originally designed as a 12-strand structure, capable of operating within a 12-dimensional temporal matrix, where identity is not bound to a single point of awareness or a single timeline. These 12 strands do not represent biological redundancy. They represent phased layers of consciousness, each aligned with a specific temporal band and density of reality. Active strands allow consciousness to move between parallel temporal fields without fragmenting identity. Inactive strands function as memory carriers of the architecture, not as genetic waste. The fall into 3D perception was not a punishment. It was a limitation, a compression of consciousness into a survival bandwidth. This compression altered the way time is experienced. Instead of parallel fields of probability, time became a line. Instead of resonance, choice became reaction. Instead of coherence, identity became defense. At this point, a negative timeline emerged, not as evil but as misalignment. The positive timeline does not represent salvation. It represents the restoration of original functionality. It is the timeline in which DNA begins to remember itself. Not symbolically, structurally. Artificial timelines are systems sustained by fear feedback loops, technological interference, and distorted time mechanics that feed on predictability. Organic timelines are self-correcting, coherence-based, and require no control. The reason the positive timeline feels subtle is that organic systems do not announce themselves. They stabilize quietly. When fear-based narratives lose energetic input, the timelines built upon them lose cohesion. Nothing explodes. Nothing ends dramatically. Systems simply stop being convincing. Amenti is not a place. It is a planetary consciousness interface. Amenti is a temporal memory network embedded within the planetary structure, enabling the realignment of individual and collective temporal vectors with the original source architecture. The Amenti fields function as a corrective mechanism for temporal fragmentation. They do not fix reality. They correct misalignment between consciousness and time. When the Amenti fields activate, time stops collapsing inward through trauma and begins unfolding outward through neutrality. This process is already underway. Not globally, not uniformly, but precisely where perception disengages from reinforcing fear. The positive timeline is not chosen by belief, is accessed through coherence. Coherence is the absence of internal contradiction. When thoughts, emotions, and perception align without force, the signal stabilizes. Stabilized signals naturally phase into compatible timelines. This is how multidimensional movement works. Not through portals, through resonance. The reason many feel disconnected from old ambitions is not failure or loss of purpose, is deprogramming. Old goals were designed to maintain engagement with distorted temporal loops. Productivity as identity, struggle as virtue, urgency as meaning. As these constructs dissolve, the mind encounters silence where motivation once lived. This silence is often mistaken for emptiness. In reality, it is unused bandwidth. This state precedes strand reactivation. Not physical mutation. Expansion of perception. The ability to perceive time less as pressure and more as environment. This is why the future now feels strange. Not threatening. Not exciting. Just undefined. An undefined future signals exit from scripted timelines. Artificial timelines require predictability. They require emotional charge. They require constant reaction. When attention withdraws, the system can no longer feed. This is not rebellion. It is starvation of distortion. The positive timeline is not without challenges. It is without distortion-generated suffering. Pain still appears. Loss still occurs. But events no longer collapse into identity narratives that endlessly echo through time. This is what Amenti consciousness restores. Memory without trauma. Experience without fragmentation. As more individuals stabilize in this state, the collective timeline shifts quietly. Not by agreement, by probability weighting. Timelines with lower energetic input lose dominance. This is why collapsed narratives feel exhausted. Fatigue from fear is not apathy. It is evolutionary exhaustion from distortion. Our cosmic origin is not about where we come from, but about how we were designed to function. Multidimensional consciousness operating within matter without forgetting itself. Earth is not a prison. It is a restoration zone. The positive timeline is the one in which memory returns without drama, in which identity softens instead of hardening, in which time expands instead of contracts. Nothing needs to be done to enter it. Action belongs to the old system. Stabilization is enough. As coherence increases, reality reorganizes. Relationships simplify. Conflicts lose charge. Decisions arrive without anxiety. Life feels less symbolic and more direct. This is not transcendence. It is normalization. The positive timeline does not promise utopia. It restores baseline reality. A reality in which consciousness is not at war with itself. That is why it feels quiet. That is why it feels anticlimactic. That is why it feels real. If you understand this, welcome to the club.